The seating card displayed my sister's entire guest list printed in raised gold script. 200 names in neat, precise lines, and mine wasn't among them. I stood at the edge of the manicured lawn overlooking the cliffs, wearing the leather boots I'd broken in on 3 different continents, holding an empty card that didn't hold me, while a coordinator with an iPad politely asked if I was part of the catering team. My father sent me a single text message that afternoon, right in the middle of my sister's wedding, and I still have it saved on my phone. No one cares about your career. He had absolutely no idea that in 90 minutes, 300 people would rise to their feet for it, and the loudest lawn in the bay would go completely silent. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Welcome back to Their Secret Stories, where quiet women finally get the last word and the loudest rooms go still. My name is Gillian Burke, and if a story ever made you sit up a little straighter, you're home. Drop a comment, tell me where you're watching from and what time it is, and be sure to subscribe. I'd left my apartment near the military airfield at dawn, my coffee turning cold in the cup holder, and I drove the entire 4 hours with the radio off. That's a habit I do now. After a deployment, your ears get tired of the noise, and the silence feels less like emptiness and more like a room you can finally sit down in. I'd been home 5 weeks. 5 weeks of sleeping in a bed that didn't move, of grocery stores that were too bright, of civilian acquaintances asking how my trip was, like I'd been to a resort. My phone buzzed on the passenger seat, somewhere past the coastal highway, and I glanced over at a red light. It was from my command, "Keep your phone on this weekend, Major." That was the whole message. No context, no explanation, which in my line of work is standard and also never means nothing. I typed back a simple copy that, "Ma'am," and set the phone face down. In 14 years, I've learned that when the Marine Corps tells you to stay reachable, you don't ask why on an open line. You just stay reachable. So, I did what I always did. I filed it away, kept both hands on the wheel, and told myself it was probably delayed paperwork. The exit for the Bay County came up green and clean, hedges trimmed to the inch, and I felt my shoulders climb toward my ears without permission. I'd faced down things I'm not legally allowed to describe. And still, the closer I got to that long black iron gate, the more my stomach folded in on itself like a letter nobody was going to read. Why would they need me reachable at a wedding miles away from anything that mattered to the military? My mother met me on the front steps of the estate with a smile she keeps strictly for photographs. Helena Burke has spent 30 years managing how our family looks from the outside, and she is very good at it. She hugged me the way you hug someone you don't want to wrinkle one arm, cheek to the air beside my cheek. And then she stepped back and did the thing she always does. She looked at my clothes. I was wearing dark slate trousers and a plain cream linen shirt, ironed clean, the most civilian thing I own. Her eyes went from my collar to my flat shoes and back up, and something in her mouth tightened a 1/4 inch. "You made it," she said like she'd bet against it. "We're so glad." Then quieter, steering me inside by the elbow before anyone on the lawn could see me too clearly. "We'll talk about the seating later. It got complicated." Complicated is a word my family uses the way other families use. I'm sorry. The foyer smelled of orchids and wax polish. There were framed engagement photos everywhere. Bianca and Dominic laughing on a dock. Bianca and Dominic under a canopy of oaks. My sister's face blown up to the size of a window in every room. I set my bag down by the stairs. "Where do you want me?" I asked, because that is always the question in this house, and I have always answered it. My mother's smile flickered like a bulb about to go. "Just stay flexible for me today," she said, patted my arm, and was gone in a rustle of silk toward the kitchen. I stood alone in a house full of my sister's face, wondering exactly what got complicated and already knowing it was me. Here is what I could not tell my mother, or my father, or the coordinator, or you, not the parts that matter. Something happened on a deployment almost a year ago. There was a night. I've signed my name to enough documents to know which words I'm allowed to arrange and which ones will land me in a room with no windows. So, I'll say only this: I did my job. And then I did a little more than my job. And when it was over, 2 people were alive who should not have been, and one was not who should have been. That's the shape of it. That's all I get to give you and all I gave anyone. My command's message sat in my pocket like a stone. Keep your phone on this weekend. I have a habit my old sergeant calls overcarrying. If something can be my responsibility, I'll pick it up. I'll strap it to my back and I'll walk it home so nobody else has to. It's kept people alive. It's also why I was standing in that foyer, freshly home from my most recent rotation, and still carrying a night from almost a year before, wondering how to be useful at a wedding I wasn't in. I deployed again since that night and come home 5 weeks ago, and none of the distance had put it down. Because that's the deal I've always made with this family, unspoken but ironclad. If I'm good enough, if I'm quiet enough, if I carry enough, then one day they'll look at me and be proud. I was 34 years old and still paying into that account. I didn't know yet that the account had been closed for years, and I was the only one still making deposits. But I'd find out that weekend, and the man who finally showed me was already fixing his cuffs in the room upstairs. My father came down the staircase like he was arriving somewhere important, which in his mind he always is. Gillian Burke is 62, silver at the temples, and he runs a high-end yacht brokerage that put his name on half the slips in this marina. People shake his hand at Yacht Club galas. That handshake is his whole religion. He saw me at the bottom of the stairs, and his face did the arithmetic it always does, quick and cold, adding up whether my presence was an asset or a problem to be managed. "Gillian," he said my name like a line item. "You're here early." "I wanted to help," I said. His eyes did what my mother's had done. Traveled down my plain clothes, and I watched him decide I'd pass the lowest bar. At least I wasn't in a uniform. Good. A couple in linen drifted past the open door, and my father's whole body changed, warmed, brightened. "Preston, Celia, come in." "Come in." He steered them toward me with a hand on each of their backs. "This is my eldest, Gillian. She does something with the military. Administrative side, I think. Very steady girl. Administrative side. I have a security clearance most senators can't dream of. And my own father introduced me like I answer phones." I smiled and shook their hands, because that's what steady girls do. And I felt the old familiar burn start low in my chest, the one I've spent a career learning to breathe through. "So nice to meet you," Celia said, already looking past me toward the champagne. My father was already gone, already laughing at something Preston said, his hand on Preston's shoulder like they were brothers. I stood there in the warm orchid, scented air, introduced and dismissed in the same breath. I found out I'd been cut from the wedding party by accident from a florist. She was checking her list in the dining room and asked me kindly if I was one of the bridesmaids so she could set aside a bouquet. "I was told there'd be 4, she said, frowning at her clipboard. "But I've only got 3 names. 3 names. My sister has 1 sister." I went and found my mother in the pantry and I kept my voice level. The way you keep your voice level when you're holding something that could break. Mom, am I not standing up with Bianca? She didn't turn around from the flowers. She was fussing. Oh, honey, it just got so crowded up front. And the photographer said the line looked cleaner with an even number. And you're always so busy. We didn't want to obligate you. She said it all in one smooth breath, the way you read a script you've rehearsed. Could you keep an eye on the registry table for us, though? You're so good at logistics. I had asked to be here. I had driven 4 hours. I had ironed the most invisible clothes I owned so I wouldn't embarrass anyone. And I was being handed the registry table like a consolation prize with a bow on it. Sure, I said, because the word was already out of my mouth before the burn could turn into anything my mother would have to see. She finally turned, relieved, and put both hands on my arms. You understand, don't you? She said, searching my face for the yes she needed. And there it was. The question my whole family runs on. The one that has cost me 20 years of standing at the edges of rooms. You understand, don't you? Bianca found me by the registry table an hour later, radiant in a robe with bride stitched across the back in cursive. And she hugged me like she meant it, because she did, in the way she means most things, warmly and without looking too closely. You came? She said. I told Mom you'd come. My sister is 28 and has never once had to ask where she should stand in a room. She has always simply belonged in the center of it, and she loves me the uncomplicated way people love things that have always been there. Of course, I came, I said. She squeezed my hand and then, in the same breath, can you make sure the seating cards get to the right tables? You're so much better at that stuff than I am. She didn't hear it. That's the thing about Bianca. She doesn't hear how I get handed the work and kept out of the picture because to her it's just Gillian being Gillian. Capable and off to the side. Dominic came up behind her, her groom tall and a little rumpled and kind around the eyes. He shook my hand with both of his. Gillian, God, it's good to finally meet you. Bianca talks about you all the time. He glanced at the registry table, at the seating cards in my hand, and I saw a small question cross his face, the beginning of a man doing math he hadn't meant to do. You're not. He started, and Bianca was already pulling him away toward the tent, laughing, and he went. But he looked back at me once over his shoulder. It was the first time all day someone had looked back. I didn't know it yet, but that small backward glance was the first crack in the wall. My grandmother Sybil is 80, and does not manage how anyone looks from the outside. She found me by the table, took my face in both her papery hands, and said loud enough for the room, there she is, the best of the whole bunch. My mother across the room went still. Gran, I said, smiling, ducking my head. You can't say that at a wedding. I can say whatever I like. I'm old. She pulled me down to her level, and her voice dropped, the smile vanishing. Gillian, listen to me. They're keeping something from you. I felt the day tilt half a degree. What do you mean? There was a letter, she started. It came to the house last week, and then my mother was there, appearing at Sybil's elbow the way she appears. All warmth and steel. Mama, you're going to wear yourself out. Let's get you sitting down before the heat. She had a hand on my grandmother's shoulder, already turning her, already steering, and Sybil looked back at me, her whole face saying more than she could finish. A letter, she mouthed. And then my mother walked her away toward the shade, murmuring about her blood pressure. And the moment closed like water over a stone. I stood there with a stack of seating cards in my hand and a hum starting behind my ribs. A letter that came to the house. Something they were keeping from me. In my family, secrets aren't unusual, but they usually run one direction. Out to keep the picture clean. This one was running the other way, and it had my name on it. I looked down at the cards in my hand, and for the first time that day, I stopped being sad and started being curious. I'd brought a black tactical rucksack with me from the car, an ugly, practical thing. Inside, wrapped in a spare shirt so it wouldn't rattle, was a small, matty black wooden box. I hadn't opened it. That sounds strange, I know. To carry a thing 400 miles and not open it. But I'd had my reasons. And the reasons had names I wasn't ready to say out loud in a house full of orchids. When my mother swept Sybil away, I took the bag upstairs to the room they'd put me in, the cold attic loft at the end of the hall, and I slid it deep into the closet behind a stack of extra folding chairs. I stood there a second with my hand on the shelf. The box had come to me 2 weeks ago, in a padded envelope with a return address I recognized and a cover letter I'd read exactly once before I stopped. It was the decoration itself, the physical medal, mailed to me quietly ahead of a formal ceremony the Marine Corps said it was still arranging. A date and a place not yet set. Whatever it held, it had cost more than I could afford to think about at my sister's wedding. So I hid it. I'm good at hiding things. It's practically half my job. And I told myself I'd carry it back home, unopened, and deal with it some quiet Tuesday, when there was no one around to watch my face come apart. I pushed the folding chairs in front of it and shut the closet door. Downstairs, someone was testing the microphone, the flat electric thump of it coming up through the floorboards. 1, 2, 1, 2. I went back down to the registry table, but all afternoon some part of me kept feeling the weight of that closed black box at the end of the hall, like a tooth you can't stop touching. The afternoon filled up with the small, useful work nobody sees. I straightened the seating cards. I found a spare extension cord for the band. I fixed a wobbling table leg with a folded piece of cardstock. And I carried 2 cases of champagne in from the delivery van because the caterers were short a pair of hands. And I have carried heavier things up worse hills. That's when it happened. A woman in a fascinator, a guest, older pearls, caught my arm as I passed with the second case. "Excuse me, dear. Could you tell them the bar is out of the good tonic? And when you have a moment, table 16 needs more bread." She wasn't being cruel. That's the part that stays with me. She looked at a woman in plain clothes, carrying champagne, and simply saw the help. Because that's the only frame she had for me, and I fit it. "I'll pass it along," I said. And I did, because it was easier than the conversation the truth would require. I set the champagne down in the tent and stood for a second in the cool shade, and I thought about the rows of men and women I've stood in front of, the ones who'd have stopped breathing if I told them to. Here I was, fetching tonic. I want to be honest with you, because I promised you honest. It wasn't the tonic that got me. It was how easily I let it happen, how well the frame fit. How many years I'd spent making myself small enough to fit whatever frame this family handed me. I picked up an empty tray and headed back out into the light. The band struck the first bars of a sound check, and a pair of headlights I didn't recognize turned in at the far black gate. I stepped out onto the front lawn to catch my breath. And for a moment, I let myself remember somewhere I'm not allowed to name, just the feel of it. Grit in my teeth. A radio voice going tight. A hand I was holding that had gone from gripping to not. 5 weeks, and it still comes up through the floor of me without warning, the way the microphone thump had come up through the floorboards. I closed my eyes, counted my breaths the way they teach you, and put it back in its box, the way I put everything back in its box. Just get through the weekend, I told myself. Smile at the pictures you're not in. Drive home Sunday, open the real box on some quiet Tuesday alone. That was the whole plan. That was as far as I could see. And then a black SUV I'd never seen before came up the drive slow, gravel popping under the tires, and stopped at the edge of the lawn. The doors opened. A man and a woman got out, both maybe 60, dressed with care. The man in a dark suit that didn't quite fit, like he'd bought it for exactly one kind of occasion. A young woman climbed out of the back, early 20s, holding herself very straight. They stood there a moment, taking in the tent and the lights and the sea of my sister's face on every banner. And they looked lost and certain at the same time. The way people look when they've come a long way to do something they promise they'd do. The man saw me. Something in his face steadied. He walked toward me across the grass, and he said the words that split the whole day open. "Excuse me, is this the Burke wedding? We're here for Gillian." For a second, I couldn't make my mouth work. Nobody comes here for me. I'm the one who comes for other people. "I'm Gillian," I said. The man's whole face changed. The way a held breath changes when it finally goes. "We're the Coles," he said. "Jared's parents. This is his sister, Nora, and the ground I'd been standing on all day. The careful, small ground of the registry table, the tonic, and the seating cards quietly went out from under me. I had not spoken Jared Cole's name out loud to anyone since I came home. I'd barely let myself think it. And now his mother was standing on my parents' lawn with her hands pressed together at her mouth, and his father was reaching for my hand. And his sister was looking at me like I was something out of a story she'd been told her whole life. "We're sorry to come without warning, Mr. Cole said. "We didn't want to make a scene, but we were told. We heard you'd be here this weekend, and we just couldn't let it pass without—" His voice broke, and he stopped and gripped my hand harder. Behind me, I heard my father's voice come out onto the porch, bright and territorial. "Gillian, who are these people? Are they on the list?" I didn't turn around. I was holding Mr. Cole's hand and looking at his wife, and I understood in the cold, clear way you understand things you've been running from that whatever weekend I thought I was having was over. A different one was starting, whether I was ready or not. "They're with me," I said, loud enough for my father to hear. "They're my guests." And I felt him go silent on the porch behind me, which almost never happens. My father waited until I'd gotten the Coles seated in the shade with cold drinks. And then he took my arm and walked me around the side of the house, where the guests couldn't see, which is where all the real conversations in my family happen. "Who are they?" he said, not a question, a demand. "They're not on Bianca's list." "I've never seen them in my life." "They're family of a Marine from my unit," I said. I invited them. That was as much as I could give him, and even that was more than I should have. "Your unit." He said it like a word in a foreign language. "Gillian, this is your sister's wedding. 200 people. The managing partners are here. The investors are here, people I do business with. And you've brought, what? Strangers. A man in a suit off the rack." I kept my voice flat and even. The same voice I use when everything is on fire and someone has to sound calm. "They lost their son, I was there. It matters that I'm here, and it matters that they are." For 1 second, something moved behind my father's eyes, and I thought maybe the words "lost their son" would land somewhere human in him. But he spent 62 years building a face that doesn't let things land. "Just keep them out of the way," he said. Don't let them make this day about anything but Bianca. She's waited her whole life for today. Don't you take 1 minute of it from her. Then he straightened his jacket, put his yacht club handshake smile back on, and walked back into the light to be Gillian Burke for his guests. I stood in the shade a moment longer. Don't you take 1 minute of it from her. I would remember those words later, when the whole lawn was on its feet. Mrs. Cole found me at the edge of the tent while I was refilling the water pitchers. Even then, even with them here, I couldn't stop being useful. It's the only way I know how to hold still. She took the pitcher gently out of my hands and set it down. Can I talk to you a minute? She said. Just us. We walked a little way onto the grass, away from the band. She held both my hands in both of hers, and her eyes were wet and steady at the same time, the way only mother's eyes get. We never got to thank you, she said. Not properly. There was a service and there were men in uniform who said kind things, and it was all. It was very correct. But nobody would tell us what actually happened. We're not allowed to know. Her thumb moved over the back of my hand. But I'm his mother. I know somebody carried my boy. I know somebody stayed with him. And when we heard your name, we knew it was you. Mrs. Cole, I said. And my voice did something I couldn't control, so I stopped and started again. I can't. There are things I'm not permitted to. I'm not asking you to break your rules, she said. I'm asking you to let me thank you. That's all. Let a mother thank you. And I, who have carried the wounded and the dead and never once set the weight down, found that I did not know how to let someone thank me. I looked away toward the tent, full of my sister's face. You don't need to thank me for that, I said. I do, she said simply. It's the only thing I have left to give him. What did my son's last hour cost you, that you'd carry it this quiet? My father moved the Coles to a table at the very back before dinner, the one half hidden behind a tent pole where they'd need to lean to see anything. He did it the way he does everything ugly, through my mother, through a whispered word to the coordinator. By the time I noticed, their place cards had simply migrated to table 16. At the rim of the lawn near the catering vans, I found the coordinator, and I did not raise my voice. I have learned that the people who get things done are almost never the ones raising their voices. The couple at 16? I said. The Coles. I need them at a table where they can see the toasts. Not the head table, I understand, but not by the catering vans either. She looked at her chart. Everything's assigned. Then unassign something. I said, pleasant and immovable. Or I'll speak to the bride. I would never have spoken to the bride. But I've spent a career knowing which pressure moves which door, and she believed me, and she found them a spot with a clear line to the front. I did for the Coles what I had never once managed to do for myself. I stood between them and the small cruelties of this family, and I made a place for them in the picture. And that's the thing I want you to sit with, because I've had to. I could fight for other people all day long. I would carry a stranger's mother's grief across a lawn on my back. But when it came to my own place at the table, I'd hand it over with a smile and say, you understand, don't you? My mother caught me by the drinks table before the ceremony and reached up to my collar with 2 fingers, the way she used to fix my hair before school. There was a small silver pin there, a plain enameled thing, the insignia of a unit that no longer officially exists in any way I can discuss. I wear it the way some people wear a wedding ring for someone who's gone. It's not regulation to wear with civvies technically, but no one had ever once noticed it in this house because no one in this house ever looked that closely at me. My mother noticed. Sweetheart, she said soft. Would you take that off? Just for today. Nothing, nothing military. We want the photos to feel timeless. Timeless. My hand went up to the pin on its own. I felt the little cool weight of it under my fingers. That pin has a name attached to it and a face and a last radio call. I have worn it every day since a night I can't describe to keep from forgetting how much it costs to still be standing here in slate trousers at a wedding. It's just a small pin, I said. No one will see it. I'll see it, my mother said gently and smiled and waited. And here is the part I'm not proud of. I took it off. My fingers stopped for one beat, one at the clasp. And then I unpinned it and closed it in my palm and put it in my pocket. And I felt like I'd taken off a piece of my own skin and handed it to a coat check. Thank you, honey, my mother said, and floated off toward the seats. I stood there holding a wedding I wasn't in clothes with nothing of me left on them. Dominic heard my father talking about me. I didn't plan it, and neither did he. I was behind the caterer's tent looking for a working outlet for the coffee urn. And the two of them were on the other side of the canvas, close enough that I could hear my father's voice go low and confidential. The way it does when he's telling someone the real story. Just between us, my father was saying. She's had a hard time settling after the deployment thing. Helena and I hoped she'd grow out of it. Do something we could, put on a family newsletter, but she's stubborn. Gets it from her grandmother. We love her, obviously. She's not the daughter we planned on. Bianca's the easy one. I stood very still on my side of the canvas with a coffee urn in my hands. Not the daughter we planned on. There are things you can hear 100 times in 100 small ways over a lifetime, and then someone says the whole sentence out loud, and it lands like a new wound anyway. And then Dominic's voice. Quiet. And I hadn't expected it. She served 2 combat tours, Gideon. That's the daughter you planned on. Any man would be proud. Silence on the other side of the canvas. My father, for once, without a smooth reply. Then cool. You'll understand our family better once you're in it. I set the urn down before my hands could shake it. When I came around the tent, Dominic was standing alone, jaw tight, and he saw me and knew instantly that I'd heard all of it. He opened his mouth. Gillian? It's fine, I said, which was the biggest lie I told all day. But I filed his face away. Someone in this family had said proud. Bianca came looking for me 20 minutes before the ceremony. Half in her dress, veil pinned crooked. Panic bright in her eyes the way it gets bright in brides. Gil, the unity candle isn't lit. The minister can't find the lighter. And Mom's dealing with the florists, and I can't do this if one thing goes wrong. Please, can you? I've got it, I said, and I did. I found the lighter. I fixed her veil. I got the candles sorted, told the minister where to stand, and smoothed the train of her dress, where it had caught on a chair, kneeling on the grass in my slate trousers while my sister looked down at me. And she said, meaning it as the kindest thing, God, you're so good at this. What would I do without you back here? Back here. Not up there. Standing with her, the sister of the bride. Back here on my knees in the grass, keeping the machine running so the picture up front would be perfect. She didn't mean it as a knife. That's what I need you to understand about Bianca. She has never once meant it as a knife. And that's almost worse, because it means the shape of my place in this family is so settled that even the person I love most doesn't see it anymore. She just sees Gillian, so good at this back here. You'd manage, I said, and finished with the train, stood, and brushed the grass off my knees. She hugged me hard. smelling of hairspray and happiness. "I'm so glad you're my sister," she said, and floated off toward the aisle, leaving me kneeling, height in my heart, even though I was standing. Then a guest tapped my shoulder and asked where the restrooms were. I pointed. That was my ceremony. Jared's little sister. Nora found me after the ceremony while the guests were flowing toward the reception pavilion. She was 19 or 20, and she had her brother's eyes. I could tell, even though I'd only ever seen his eyes in one photograph, and in one last moment I don't get to describe. She stood in front of me, twisting a program in her hands. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course," I said. "My mom said today that you'd want to have the thing with you. She said to tell you it was okay to bring it out if you wanted." I felt the afternoon go cold and clear again, that feeling like altitude. "What thing?" I said very carefully, though I already knew. And my eyes went without my permission up toward the window of the attic loft, toward a closet with folding chairs stacked in front of a matte black box. Nora followed my glance up to the window and then looked back at me, and something in her young face was older than it should have been. "She said you'd know," Nora said quietly. "She said tell Gillian she doesn't have to hide it, not around us." And there it was, the box I'd carried 400 miles and buried behind chairs, being called out into the light by a grieving girl who'd been sent to give me permission I didn't know I was waiting for. I looked up at that window for a long moment. Everything I'd built my day around, staying small, staying useful, staying hidden, was suddenly hanging on whether I walked up those stairs. "Excuse me a second," I said to Nora, and I went inside. I went up the stairs slower than my knees wanted to, down the hall past the framed faces into the little loft room. I moved the folding chairs. I took the black tactical bag off the shelf and sat down on the edge of the narrow cot with it in my lap. And for a long minute, I just held it, the way you hold a phone you know is about to ring with news. Then I unwrapped the spare shirt, took out the matte black wooden box, and I finally opened it. Inside, on a bed of dark velvet, was a medal I had not let myself look at since the padded envelope came. A blue ribbon. A heavy star of polished silver. Plain and heavy and old-fashioned. The kind of thing that looks like it weighs more than it does. And it weighs more than it does. There was a folded citation under it that I'd read exactly once. I didn't read it again. I didn't need to. I knew what it said in the flat. Careful language they use about a night, and a major and 2 men pulled out of a place I can't name, and a third who couldn't be pulled far enough. Whatever was in that box, it had cost a life to earn, and the life had a name. And the name's mother was sitting at the back, trying to see the toasts. I sat there on my sister's spare cot, holding the heaviest light thing I own. I understood then why I hadn't opened it. Because a medal is a story the government tells about the worst night of your life. And it's true, and it's not the whole truth. And the whole truth doesn't fit in a matty black box. I closed the lid. I didn't cry, and I won't pretend I did. I just sat with it a while in the quiet room at the top of the stairs, above a party full of people who thought I fetched the tonic. I put the medal back in the closet. I want you to understand that, because it matters for everything that comes after. I had it in my hand, the one thing in that whole house that could have wiped the smug arithmetic off my father's face, and I chose to hide it again behind the folding chairs. Not out of shame, out of the same old habit I've been describing to you all day. The one my sergeant calls over-carrying. This was Bianca's day. My father's words were still in my ears. Don't you take 1 minute of it from her. And the terrible thing is, I agreed with him. I did. I'd rather have died than turn my sister's wedding into a scene about me. So I wrapped the box back in the shirt, stacked the chairs in front of it, and I went back downstairs to fetch tonic, fix table legs, and stand at the edge of the picture, because that is who I had decided to be, and I was very committed to it. Nora was waiting at the bottom of the stairs. She looked at my empty hands. She didn't say anything, but her eyes asked, and I gave a small shake of my head. "Not today," I whispered. Something in her face fell, and then understood and forgave me for it, which was more grace than I'd shown myself. "Okay," she said softly, "whenever you're ready. Or not. It's yours." Those two small words would keep me up at night for years. I went back out into the gold light and the music, and I told myself the plan still held. Get through the weekend, open the box on a quiet Tuesday alone. I had absolutely no idea that the box wasn't going to stay closed, because someone with 4 stars had already decided otherwise 400 miles away. At the reception, my father took the microphone before dinner to welcome everyone, and I watched him do the thing he was born to do. He stood under the string lights with a glass in his hand, and he built a family out of words, brick by brick, and it was beautiful, and almost none of it was true. "Helena and I have been blessed," he said, "with 2 extraordinary daughters." He gestured to Bianca glowing at the head table, and the room went awe. He did not gesture to me. I was standing by the registry table at the back, where I'd been assigned, and his eyes passed over me the way your eyes pass over a coat rack. "Family's everything to us," he said. "It's the only thing that lasts. The name you carry, the people you stand beside." He raised his glass to family. 200 people raised their glasses to a family I wasn't in a toast given by a man who'd cut me from the line to keep the photos clean. And I stood at the back and clapped because that's what you do. And I felt the strangest thing come over me. Not anger. Something quieter and more dangerous than anger. I felt done. Not loud. Don't. Not throw a drink. Don't. Just somewhere very deep and very old. A small light going off in a room I'd kept lit my whole life, the room where I waited for him to be proud of me. He talked about the name you carry, the people you stand beside, and he had no idea he was standing beside a woman who'd carried people out of hell and would never, ever put that on a holiday card. The band came back in, the salads went out, and a caterer told me table 16 still needed bread. Sybil caught my sleeve as I passed with the bread. My grandmother has a grip like a hawk's talon, and the timing of a woman who's watched this family for 60 years. "Sit," she said, patting the chair beside her. And I sat, because you sit when Sybil tells you to. She leaned in close, smelling of mint and rosewater. "I have to tell you before that man does something even I can't forgive," she said. There was a letter. It came to the house. 10 days ago now. Official Marine Corps return address. The real kind. I saw it on the hall table. My whole body went quiet. What did it say? Gran. I don't know exactly. Her old eyes flashed. Because your father took it into his study and shut the door. And when I asked him what it was, he said it was nothing. It was addressed to you, but it was nothing. And I could tell by his face it was not nothing, Gillian. I raised him. I know his lying face better than his true one. A letter addressed to me, official, opened by my father, called nothing, and hidden. My mind was already running the possibilities, cold and fast, the way it runs them when a mission's gone sideways. Where is it now? That's the thing, Sybil said and gripped my hand harder. I went to look this morning. It's gone from his study. He's moved it or burned it. I couldn't find it. She sat back, breathing hard, her eyes shining with something between grief and fury. Whatever they sent you, baby, your own father decided you weren't allowed to have it on today of all days. Now what would a man hide from his own daughter about the military? I was halfway out of the chair to go find my father when the coordinator materialized at my elbow, breathless with a crisis. The chocolate fountain is leaking, and the best man's lost his cards for the toast. And your mother said you'd know what to do. Of course my mother said I'd know what to do. I always know what to do. That's my whole function in this family, the fixer at the back of the room. And even now, even with my grandmother's words ringing in my ears, some trained reflex in me stood up and went to handle it. I want you to see how deep the grooves ran. I had just learned that my father had hidden an official letter from the military addressed to me on the day of days, and my first instinct was to go fix a chocolate fountain. I got the best man his cards. I found a bar towel for the fountain and told the caterer to slow the flow. It took 9 minutes, and the whole 9 minutes, my mind was 2 places at once. Hands doing the small work, heart circling the letter like a hawk. What would the military send me by mail to my parents' house? Not orders, those don't come that way. Not routine. Something formal, something embossed. Something my father took one look at and decided I couldn't have. By the time I'd stopped the leak and turned back towards Sibyl, the moment had scattered. Dinner was being served, and my father was across the lawn laughing with the guests, untouchable, glowing, the picture of a man with nothing to hide. I stood there with a wet bar towel in my hand and made a decision. Not tonight at the table in front of everyone. But before this weekend was over, I was going to ask my father to his face what he'd burned. That's when Staff Sergeant Paige Miller walked onto my parents' lawn in a dark dress, and my knees nearly went out from under me. Staff Sergeant Paige Miller is 36 years old and one of the 2 people alive because of a night I can't describe. And the last time I'd seen her, she'd been on a stretcher with my jacket balled under her head. Now she was walking across the grass toward me, upright, healed, whole. And she stopped in front of me and did not hug me. She came to attention just slightly, just enough, the way you do for someone you'd follow anywhere. "Mom," she said, and her voice was thick. "Paige." I gripped her hand. "You're standing, thanks to you." She looked around at the tent, the lights, the head table, my sister's face on every banner, and I watched her read the whole situation in about 4 seconds, the way good sergeants read a room. Her eyes came back to me, and to my plain clothes, and to the registry table behind me, and something in them narrowed. "Mom," she said carefully, Are you in the wedding?" "It's complicated," I said. She didn't push, but her jaw set. Paige has never in her life let a slight to me pass without noting it for later. Then she leaned in quieter. And the thing she said made the ground tilt again. "Mom, they told you to keep your phone on this weekend, right? You got that word from command." "Yesterday?" "Why, Paige? What's going on?" She looked at me a long moment, and I saw her decide how much she was allowed to say and land on almost nothing, which is its own kind of answer. Just keep it on. "And ma'am, wherever they've got you standing right now, don't get too comfortable back here." I pulled my phone out of my pocket right there, behind the registry table, and there was a new message from my command sent 11 minutes ago, and it said, "Confirm your present coordinates." 1600. I read it 3 times. Confirm your present coordinates. My command does not ask where I am for fun. In 14 years, I have learned that a request for your coordinates, time to the hour, means something is coming to those coordinates. and it means someone above me has already decided it's coming. Whether you're ready or not. It was 2:45. I stood behind the registry table at my sister's wedding in clothes with nothing of me left on them, holding a phone that had just told me the outside world was about to walk in the front gate. Paige was watching my face. "You getting it now?" she said quietly. "Getting what?" I said, but my mouth had gone dry because I was starting to put the shape of it together. The letter, the phone. Keep it on. Confirm your coordinates. The Coles driving 400 miles. Nora saying she'd know. And a matte black box behind the folding chairs upstairs. Paige, what did they plan? She just looked at me. And there was something in her eyes that was pride and warning and respect all at once. "You'll want to be standing somewhere with your head up." "Ma'am," she said. "Not back here. Not by the catering vans." I looked down at the phone. My thumbs moved over the keys and then stopped. Whatever was coming, once I confirmed my coordinates, there'd be no putting it back in the box. I could feel the whole careful weekend I'd built, the small, useful, invisible weekend waiting to come down. I started to type a reply. Then I stopped and looked up at the house. Before I could send anything, Sybil was back at my side, moving faster than an 84-year-old should, with something clutched against her chest. "I found it," she whispered, fierce and triumphant. "He didn't burn it. He hid it in the one place he thought I'd never go, the bottom of his fishing tackle box in the garage. I've been looking all afternoon." She pressed it into my hands. A large envelope, cream and heavy. The embossed seal of the Department of the Navy in the corner, my name typed across the front, my rank spelled out in full. It had been opened. The flap was torn where my father's thumb had gone under it. I unfolded the letter inside with hands that I kept steady by an act of pure will, and I read it once, top to bottom, standing behind the registry table while the band played and 200 strangers ate their salads. It was an official notification, formal, dated, real. It informed me that I had been approved for a decoration for actions on a date I can't say, that a presentation ceremony was being arranged, and that my command would be in contact regarding time and location. This was the required piece. The formal written notification the military always mails to your official address of record, and it had been sent weeks ago, before anyone knew where or when the ceremony would land. The texts buzzing on my phone this weekend were the other channel. The informal one, the heads up that had only started once command learned I'd be at this address these 3 days, and quietly decided to bring the whole thing to me. 2 threads. One I'd never seen because it went to a house I no longer lived in. And the letter had come to my parents' house because it's still my address of record. And my father had opened it. Read exactly what his daughter had done and what she was about to be honored for. And decided that I couldn't have it because it might, in his words to Sybil, be nothing. Because it might make today about the wrong daughter. I looked up from the letter and across the golden lawn. My father caught my eye and smiled his yacht club smile and lifted his glass to me an inch. And I understood at last that he had known all along. I found my mother by the cake, and I showed her the letter without a word. And I watched her face fall through several floors before it landed. "You knew." I said. It wasn't a question. "Gillian." She reached for my arm, and I stepped back. "Your father, we thought." "You thought what exactly?" My voice was so level it scared me. "We thought it would keep till after the wedding," she said in a rush, low, her eyes darning to see who was near. "It's not that we're not proud, honey, we are. Of course we are. It's just, Your father said if it came out today, it would turn everything into a circus. It would take over Bianca's day, and you know how she's waited. And so we thought it was better to wait to tell you next week, quietly. You were going to let me stand back here by the catering vans, I said, fetching tonic and clothes with nothing of me left on them, while a letter in the garage said the military wanted to honor me, and you were going to call that being proud. Her mouth worked. And then quietly, the truest thing my mother said all day, the thing that let me finally see her whole. Your father decides these things, Gillian, she said. He always has. I keep the peace. And there she was. Not a villain. A woman who married a man who measures everyone by what shows, and spent 30 years keeping his peace, and never once realized her own daughter was one of the things he'd decided didn't show well enough to keep. Where is he? I said. Gillian, please don't make Where is he, Mom? She looked toward the far edge of the lawn near the hedges. He's setting up the family photo, she whispered. He wants it before the light goes. My father was arranging people in front of the tall hedges at the edge of the lawn. The photographer was fussing with a reflector. The golden hour was doing its work. Bianca and Dominic in the center. My mother sliding into place. Grandmother Sybil parked at the edge in her chair, refusing to smile. I walked up with the letter still in my hand, and my father saw it, and I watched him not flinch, which was somehow worse than flinching. There you are, he said smoothly before I could speak. Good. We need you for a few of these. Then you can get back to helping. Stand up. He glanced at the frame, at the clean line of his perfect family. Stand over there behind Sybil. You can tuck in at the side. I didn't move. You opened my mail, I said quietly. His jaw tightened by a millimeter. It's not the day, Gillian. It's an official notification from the Marine Corps addressed to me. And it'll keep, he said, flat, final. The voice he uses to close a deal. This is your sister's day. Not everything is about you and your career. He said the word career like it tasted bad. No one here came to see that. They came for Bianca, so let's just get the photo. And we'll deal with your military business next week, privately, like adults. The photographer called for everyone to look this way. My father turned his yacht club smile back on for the camera. And behind that smile, I finally saw the whole of him. A man so certain that worth is the thing you can show, that he'd hidden his daughter's honor in a tackle box to keep the picture clean. So I went and stood behind the hedge. I want to be honest about that because I promised you honest. My father pointed me to a spot hidden behind Sybil's chair and the tall green wall of the hedge where the frame would swallow me, where I'd be technically present and functionally erased. And I went. Old habit, steady girl. The photographer raised the camera and started counting. And I stood there in the leaves with my honor folded in my pocket, being tucked out of my own family's picture, and my phone buzzed against my hip. I looked down. It was from my father, sent from 12 feet away, his thumbs moving behind his smile so no one would see him do it. No one cares about your career. Stay out of the pictures. I read it standing in the hedge. I looked up. My father was smiling at the camera. My mother beside him, my sister glowing, the golden light pouring over all of them, and Meef, a shadow behind a shrub, holding a phone that held the truest thing he'd ever said to me. No one cares about your career, and something in me finally, after 34 years, just quietly set the account to 0. I walked out from behind the hedge, past the photographer, across the lawn, and I kept walking out toward the row of cars parked along the drive, because the only plan I had left was the oldest one, the one I always fall back to. Leave quietly, don't make a scene, drive home, open the box on a quiet Tuesday alone. I found my car, I put my hand on the door, and then I stopped with my fingers on the cold handle, and I looked back across the whole golden lawn at the tall green hedge they'd hidden me behind. I looked at it for a long moment, and I let go of the handle. I stood in the gravel with my hand, hovering an inch from the car door. I wasn't going to open, and I understood something I'd spent my entire life not letting myself understand. Every other time I'd left, every slight, every seat at the back, every introduction as the administrative one, I'd swallowed it and driven home and told myself that leaving quietly was dignity. It wasn't dignity. It was me agreeing with them. Every time I left without a word, I was signing the story that I was the one who didn't belong in the picture, the daughter who didn't show well, the one you could hide behind a hedge and no one would miss. I was so tired of signing. I took out my phone, and I did not text my father back. There was nothing to say to a man who just told me the truth. Instead, I found Paige's number, and I sent one line. Not to threaten anyone, not to make a scene, just to plant my own feet in the ground for once in my life. Confirmed. I'm here. That was all. I hit send. And I put the phone back in my pocket, and I turned around. Away from the cars, away from the easy, quiet exit, and I walked back toward the lawn. Not to the registry table, not behind the hedge. I walked to the table where the Coles were sitting near the front, in the seats I'd fought to get them, and I pulled out the empty chair beside Jared's mother, and I sat down in the picture for the first time in my life. Mrs. Cole reached over and took my hand without a word. Across the lawn, my father was still smiling for the camera, still arranging his perfect family, with no idea at all that the photo was already ruined. I sat with the Coles while the light went from gold to amber, and for the first time all weekend, I let someone else carry the conversation. Mrs. Cole held my hand on the tablecloth and told me the part I'd never known, the part that happened on their side of that night. The night the officers came to our door, she said. One of them, a young lieutenant, he wasn't supposed to, I think, but he stayed after the others left, and he sat with us at our kitchen table until 2 a.m. And he told us he wouldn't say what happened. He said he couldn't. But he told us this. He said, "Mom, sir, I want you to know your son was not alone. There was an officer with him. She held on to him. She would not leave him. She stayed past when it was safe to stay." Mrs. Cole's thumb moved over my knuckles, and her eyes were dry now and enormous. "We didn't know your name then. We just knew there was a she. And we held on to that, Marcus and I, for a long time, that our boy had a she who wouldn't leave him." I couldn't speak. Nora across the table was crying without sound. And then, a few weeks ago, Mrs. Cole went on, a man from the military called. He said there was going to be a ceremony. He said that she had a name, and it was Major Burke. And would we, the family, want to be there when they honored her? And I said, "Sir, we will drive to the ends of the earth." She squeezed my hand until it hurt, and I let it hurt. "So here we are," she said simply. "At the ends of the earth for you, because you would not leave my boy." The lawn began to change, and my father was the last to feel it. First, it was one car, then 2. Then a small line of dark vehicles pulling in along the drive and parking with a precision that civilians never quite manage. Men and women began to step out, not many at first, in dress uniforms and in sharp, dark suits, and they did not come toward the tent. They gathered out on the wide back lawn beyond the tables, in the open grass near, where the ground sloped down, and they stood. That's all. They stood in loose ranks, quiet, hands folded, facing nothing yet, waiting for something. The guests noticed, the way a room notices a change in air pressure before anyone can name it. Conversations at the tables thinned. A woman in pearls turned in her seat to look. The band, sensing the shift, faltered on a bar and recovered. And my father, up by the hedge, finally lowered his camera smile and looked out across his lawn at the growing crowd of still, serious strangers assembling on his grass. And I watched him do the arithmetic and come up with nothing, because for the first time all day, there was something happening at his event that he had not arranged, could not control, and did not understand. He started toward them across the lawn, brisk, proprietary, a man moving to correct a scheduling error. "Excuse me," I heard him call out in his handshake voice. "Excuse me, I think there's been some confusion. This is a private event." And one of the officers in uniform turned and looked at him and said something I couldn't hear. And my father stopped walking. He just stopped 10 feet from them and stood there and did not finish his sentence. Paige appeared at my shoulder. "Mom, it's time you knew who's coming." She crouched beside my chair, so we were eye to eye, and she spoke low and fast the way she briefs. "Ma'am, I need you to hear this from me before it happens so it doesn't knock you flat. The decoration you were approved for, it's the Silver Star." She let that sit 1 second. "They don't hand those out, you know that." I knew that. My whole body knew that. The presentation was going to be at the base next month. Formal, small, she went on. But Jared's unit asked for something. They asked if it could be done sooner. And Mom, they asked if it could be done wherever his family could be. Because they wanted the Coles to see the woman who stayed with their boy get honored in person with their own eyes. "And you told Command you'd be here this weekend." She glanced toward the back lawn, toward the gathering ranks. "So Command made it happen. The request went all the way up, ma'am. And it got approved at the very top in writing. Because when a decoration like this one is already signed, and a fallen Marine's own unit asks for the family to witness it, and a 4-star decides to carry it himself, the machine that usually takes months moves in days. It stopped being a scheduling problem the moment the general put his name on it. The whole unit wanted to come. More than the unit. She looked back at me, and there was water standing in her eyes now. There are almost 300 of them out there, ma'am. Recon Marines, corpsmen. Support people from 3 commands who heard what you did and got in a truck. And there's one more coming, and he's about 5 minutes out. And you need to be standing up with your head high when he gets here. Not sitting at the back. Not behind any hedge. I looked out across my father's golden lawn at the 300 still figures assembling on the grass, come from all over the country for me. "Paige," I said, and my voice barely worked. "Who's the one that's 5 minutes out?" She almost smiled through the tears. "Mom," she said, "it's the general. You'd think I'd have sat back and let it come. I didn't. God help me. Even then, with 300 people on the lawn and a general 5 minutes out, some deep, worn-down part of me still wanted to protect my family from the size of what was about to land on them. So I went and found my father where he stood frozen near the ranks. And I tried one last time to keep the peace my mother had kept for 30 years. Dayad, he turned to me, and for once his face was open, blown open, uncomprehending. "What is Gilly? Who are all these?" "Listen to me," I said, low and urgent. "In a few minutes, something is going to happen here, and it's going to be big, and it's about me, and I can't stop it now. but I can make it smaller. Let me go out there and meet them and take it somewhere else, off to the side, quietly, and this can still be Bianca's day. Just please, trust me. Let me handle this the quiet way. I was offering him grace he had never once offered me. I was offering to shrink my own honor to keep his picture clean, one final time out of 34 years of habit. And my father, who had hidden a silver star in his tackle box, looked at me and did the only thing he knows how to do. He tried to manage it. "You've clearly caused some kind of scene," he said stiffly, gathering himself, reaching for control. "I don't know what you've arranged, but this is not the time to make yourself the center of everything. Go and tell them to leave. Tell them it's a private wedding." He didn't know. He truly didn't know what was walking toward his lawn. And so I stopped trying to save him from it. Nora came and found me one more time before it all began. And she told me the last piece, the piece I already carried, but had never heard said out loud by someone who loved him. She stood in front of me with her brother's eyes, and she said, "I need you to know that we know what today is close to." She swallowed. "Next Thursday is a year since Jared. A year. I hadn't let myself count, but she had. My mom wanted to be somewhere good this week, instead of somewhere sad," Nora said. And she said the best place in the world she could think of to be the week before the anniversary was standing in a crowd watching them honor the woman who stayed with him. So this isn't taking away from anybody's wedding. Whatever your dad thinks, for us, this is the wedding. This is the only thing we've had to look forward to in a year. And there it was, the whole weight of it, set down gently in front of me by a 19-year-old girl. Jared Cole was a real young man with a real family and a real anniversary coming. And I had been the last person to hold his hand. And I had spent this entire day fetching tonic and hiding his medal behind folding chairs, because I was afraid of taking 1 minute from a sister who has never once had to fight for a minute in her life. I looked at Nora, and I stopped being ashamed of the box. "Your brother wasn't alone," I said. "I need you to hear that from me out loud once. He was not alone, and he was not afraid at the end, and I did not leave him." Nora nodded, tears running clean down her face and behind her. Out on the drive, a single black car turned in at the gate, and everyone on the lawn went still. The car came up the long drive slowly, and the sound of it was the only sound. The band had stopped. The guests had stopped. 200 people in their linen and pearls sat frozen at their tables, and 300 service members stood in silent ranks on the back lawn, and the whole golden evening seemed to hold its breath as one black sedan rolled to a stop, and a young aide sprang out to open the rear door. My father was standing in the middle of his own lawn, alone, abandoned by every strategy he'd ever had, watching a piece of a world he'd spent his whole life dismissing arrive in force at his daughter's feet. From across the grass, I saw him look for me. Actually look for me. For the first time all day, his eyes searching the crowd. And I saw the moment they found me standing now. Standing tall between Staff Sergeant Miller and the Cole family, not behind any hedge. And I watched my father begin dimly to understand. The rear door of the sedan opened. A man stepped out, older, silver-haired, unhurried, in a dark dress uniform with 4 stars on each shoulder that caught the last of the light. He straightened, took one slow look around the lawn, at the tent, at the ranks of his people, at the 200 stunned civilians, and he began to walk toward the assembled service members with the unbothered certainty of a man who has never once in his life had to ask where he should stand in a room. And a voice rang out across my father's manicured lawn, sharp and absolute. a voice trained to cut through gunfire and gala alike, and every uniform on that grass snapped to rigid attention as one body. Attention on deck, and 200 wedding guests watched 300 warriors go still as stone. I want you to see it the way I saw it, because I'll see it the rest of my life. 300 men and women on my father's lawn, standing at attention so complete you could have heard a leaf come down. The setting sun behind them turning the whole rank to gold silhouette. The string lights just beginning to glow overhead, useless and pretty against the sheer gravity of what had assembled underneath them. And in front of all of it, 200 wedding guests. The managing partners, the investors, the woman in pearls who'd sent me for tonic, sitting utterly silent, napkins in their laps, not one of them daring to move. The champagne went flat in the glasses. Somewhere a chair scraped and stopped instantly, like even the furniture knew better. My father stood in the no-man's land between his guests and the ranks, and I have never in 34 years seen him at a loss. He was at a loss now. His mouth was slightly open. His hands, which have shaken every important hand in this county, hung at his sides, doing nothing. He looked at the ranks. He looked at the 4 stars walking toward them. He looked at me, standing tall at the front now, no longer behind anything. And I watched the first faint understanding move across his face. The understanding that the daughter he'd introduced as administrative, the one he'd sent for bread, the one he'd hidden behind a hedge and texted "no one cares about your career," was the reason 300 people had crossed the country and gone silent on his lawn. Bianca, at the head table in her wedding dress, had both hands over her mouth. Dominic had risen halfway out of his chair, and the general reached the ranks and turned and looked for one person in the crowd. "Me, at ease," General Hawk said, and 300 people settled into parade rest with a single soft rustle. And then he did something no one expected. He walked alone, away from his ranks, across the open grass, past the stunned tables, all the way to where I stood with the Cole family, and he stopped in front of me and came very slightly to attention himself. "Major Burke," he said. His voice carried because he let it. "General Jonathan Hawk, I'm sorry to interrupt your family's celebration." His eyes flicked once, and only once, toward my father, and then came back to me, and there was nothing in them but respect. "But some things won't keep, and after what you did, I decided this one wasn't going to wait in an office one more month." He turned then to include the whole frozen lawn, guests and warriors alike, and he raised his voice so that every soul on that grass would hear it. "Ladies and gentlemen, I know you came here today for a wedding, and I promise you'll have it back, but you're about to witness something most of you will never see again in your lives. And I'd ask you to stand for it." And 200 wedding guests, the woman in pearls, the managing partners, the investors, my mother by the cake, rose to their feet on my father's lawn because a 4-star general had asked them to for me. An aide stepped forward carrying a flat case, and General Hawk took from it a folded citation, and he unfolded it. And he began to read in the flat and formal language of the military the official account of a night I had never been able to describe to anyone. The night my father had hidden in his tackle box. "The President of the United States takes pleasure in presenting the Silver Star to Major Gillian Burke, United States Marine Corps, for extraordinary heroism." The general read the citation, and I will not give you all of it, because parts of it belong to a room with no windows, and parts of it belong to Jared, and parts of it I still can't say out loud without going somewhere I can't come easily back from. But my family heard it. That's what I need you to understand. For the first time in 34 years, standing on their own lawn, my mother and my father and my sister heard in plain, formal words what their administrative daughter actually did on a night they'd never asked about. They heard the word ambush. They heard, without the classified details, that when the shooting started, their daughter did not take cover, that she went the wrong way on purpose into it, toward the wounded, and pulled 2 people out of a place the citation called untenable, and that she went back a 3rd time for a 3rd and stayed with him past the point where staying was survivable and would not leave him. And that, because of what she did that night, 2 Americans came home alive who would not have. The general's voice never rose. It didn't have to. 200 guests stood in total silence and listened to a story that recontextualized every small cruelty they had watched all afternoon without knowing they were watching it. The woman in pearls had a hand pressed to her chest. Bianca was weeping openly at the head table, her veil in her fist, and my father stood alone in the grass, and I watched the words hit him one by one. Heroism. The wrong way on purpose. And I watched something in his certain face begin at last to come apart, because he was hearing in front of everyone whose opinion he had ever cared about exactly what he had hidden in his garage. When the general finished reading, the silence held for a moment longer, and then something happened that my father will live inside for the rest of his life. The guests turned to look at him. Not all at once, not on purpose. Just a slow, terrible drift of 200 faces swiveling from the woman being honored to the man who'd hosted them, the girl's father. Because that's what you do at a moment like this. You look to the family. You look for the proud father. And they found Gideon Burke standing alone on his grass with no yacht club smile left on his face. And every single person there had heard him all afternoon with their own eyes and ears. They had heard him introduce me as administrative. They had heard him call it my military business. Some of them, the ones near the hedge, had even seen him wave me to the back. And now they looked at him and did the math that I had done years ago. And I watched it land on face after face after face, the understanding of exactly what kind of man hides this daughter behind a hedge. My mother had both hands pressed to her mouth. My grandmother Sybil sat in her chair with her chin up and tears on her face and something fierce and vindicated burning in her old eyes. And Bianca, my sister, the bride, stood up from the head table in her white dress, and she looked across the lawn at me and then at our father. And I watched my sister's face change into something I'd never seen on it before. Not confusion, not obliviousness. Understanding. She looked at Dad like she was seeing the whole architecture of our childhood for the first time. And the general turned to me and lifted the case and said, "Major, if you'll permit me." General Hawk pinned the silver star to the plain cream linen shirt I'd worn to be invisible in. His hands were steady and unhurried, and when it was done, he stepped back and did the thing that undid me. He came to attention, and he saluted me, a 4-star general, in front of 300 warriors and 200 civilians and my whole family, and 300 service members behind him saluted with him as one. I returned it. I don't remember deciding to. Your body knows. And then General Hawk did the thing I had not seen coming. The thing that turned the whole evening from a moment that happened to me into a choice I had to make. He reached to the aide stand, and he took up the microphone that my father had used 2 hours ago to toast a family I wasn't in. And he held it out to me. "Major," he said gently, "just for me and the mic. 300 of your people came a long way. 200 of your family's guests are standing, And I think there might be some things that need saying on this lawn tonight." His eyes went deliberately to my father and back to me. And I understood exactly what he was offering. He was handing me the floor. He was handing me the whole stage my father had built, the microphone, the 200 witnesses, the perfect golden light, and every year of being called administrative and sent for bread and hidden behind a hedge. I could say anything. I could say all of it. I stood there with a silver star on my chest and my father's microphone in my hand, and 20 years of receipts in my mouth, and the whole lawn waited, and my father, 10 feet away, closed his eyes and braced for the bill. Here is the thing nobody tells you about finally holding the microphone. You realize the whole time you thought you wanted it, what you actually wanted was for them to hand it to you willingly. And no one ever will. And once it's just in your hand, taken, the wanting goes strange and quiet. I looked at my father with his eyes shut, braced. I could have handed him the bill for 20 years, right there in front of the managing partners and the investors and every hand he'd ever shaken. I could have read his text message aloud. "No one cares about your career," and let 200 people hear it and watch him die a small death on his own lawn. I could have told them about the tackle box, about the hedge, about administrative. I had the receipts and I had the room. And God help me. Part of me wanted to. Part of me had wanted to my whole life. And then I looked past my father. I looked at Bianca in her wedding dress on the day she'd waited her whole life for, standing there terrified that it was about to become the day her father was destroyed at her reception. I looked at the Cole family, who had driven 400 miles the week before the anniversary of their son's death to watch honor done, not vengeance. I looked at Mrs. Cole, who'd said the best place in the world to be this week was here. And I understood, standing there with the microphone hot in my hand, that I had a choice between two kinds of victory, and only one of them would leave me a person I could live with. I could win the way my father wins, by making it about the show, by using the stage to diminish someone in front of everyone who mattered to them. Or I could win the other way, the way that had put 300 people on this lawn in the first place. I set the receipts down. I lifted the microphone, and I chose to say the thing that would cost me the one dream I'd carried into that house and set me free from it in the same breath. "Thank you, General," I said, and my voice came out steady, and it carried across the whole silent lawn. "I want to say 3 things, and then I want you all to get back to a wedding." I turned first to the ranks. To the people who drove across this country to stand on a stranger's lawn tonight, you are the reason I'm still standing anywhere. Staff Sergeant Miller, I'm glad you're on your feet. I'd go back for you tomorrow. Paige's chin trembled and held. Then I turned to the Cole family, and I made myself slow down, because this part mattered more than any of it. To the Cole family, Jared was the finest of us. He was not alone, and he was not afraid at the end, and I did not leave him, and I will carry him the rest of my life. Thank you for coming the week before the hardest day of your year to give this honor to him as much as to me. Mrs. Cole bowed her head, and then last, I looked at my sister standing in her white dress with her hands at her mouth, and I felt the whole thing come clear and gentle in me at once. And to my sister Bianca, this is your day. It has always been your day, and I would never take 1 minute of it. I let that hang because my father had said those exact words to me that morning, and I watched them find him across the grass. So, I'm not going to stand up here and make this about anything else. I've got everything I came here without knowing I needed. I looked just once at my father, and there was no cruelty in it and no plea, which was new for me. I don't need anyone here to tell me what I already know. And I handed the microphone back to the general, and I stepped down off the little rise. Done. Gillian, my father said, just my name cracked in half, reaching, and then nothing. Because he had nothing, because for the first time in his life, the man had no next line. I walked back across the lawn, and I walked right past the hedge. That's the part I keep. 2 hours earlier, that tall green wall had swallowed me, tucked me out of my own family's photograph, and my father had stood 12 feet away and texted me to stay behind it. Now I walked past it with a silver star on my chest, and I did not so much as slow down, because it was just a shrub. That's all it had ever been. A shrub that a frightened man had used to hide a daughter he couldn't measure. Staff Sergeant Miller fell in on one side of me. Nora slipped her arm through mine on the other. The Coles walked with me, and behind us, 300 service members began quietly to relax and disperse across the lawn. And the terrible pressure of the moment eased into something almost like a party. Warriors and wedding guests blinking at each other in the string lights, not sure how to be in the same evening. My father stood alone by the hedge. Nobody came to him. That's the thing about building your whole life on how you look to other people. When the picture finally shows the truth, you find out how few of them were ever truly yours. My mother went to him eventually and stood beside him and kept his peace one more time, because that's who she is. But the 200 guests had seen what they'd seen and heard what they'd heard. And no toast in the world was going to unring that bell. I didn't look back at him. I want to tell you I felt triumphant. I didn't exactly. I felt light. I felt like a woman who had finally set down a weight she'd carried up too many hills, and it was the box marked their approval, and I would never pick it up again. Bianca came after me. She caught up with me near the drive, holding her dress up out of the grass, her veil gone, her makeup ruined, and she grabbed both my hands. I didn't know, she said. Gil, I swear to God I didn't know what any of that. I didn't. I let them put you back there. And I never once asked why. All these years I never asked why. I just let it be because it was easier. And I'm so sorry. And here's the thing. She was the first person in my family to ever apologize to me and mean the whole weight of it. I know you didn't know, I said. That's kind of the problem, B, but I know. She started to cry again, and this time I held her in her wedding dress. In the near dark, a bride and a newly decorated major, and over her shoulder, I could see our father still standing by the hedge, watching his 2 daughters hold each other and not being part of it. Go finish your wedding, I told her. I mean it. Go dance with your husband. She pulled back and looked at me with our grandmother's fierce eyes, the ones neither of us got from Dad. Will you dance too? One song in front of the tent where everyone can see you. And for once I said yes. My father found me later by the cars in the dark, the way we've always had our real conversations. He'd had time to build something, and what he'd built was a compliment offered stiff and late. That was quite a thing tonight, he said. The general, 300 men. I had no idea it was that you were at that level. He couldn't say proud. He got close to the shape of it and couldn't make the word. And for a second, just one, I saw the whole of him clearly. A man who had been measured his entire boyhood by what showed, by a father of his own who kept a ledger, and who learned so young that love is a thing you earn by looking good, that he never once learned there was another kind. He was the machine, and the thing the machine had ground down both. It was almost enough to break my heart. Almost. "You hid it in your tackle box, Dad," I said, not unkindly. "That's the part I won't forget." He had no answer. "Good night," I said, and I left him standing in the dark, still trying to find a version of the evening where he came out looking all right. And there wasn't one. Late that night, when the tent lights were down and the last car had gone, I sat on the edge of the narrow cot in the little loft room, and I finally opened the small, matey black wooden box that had ridden 400 miles in my tactical bag. Inside was the silver star the mail had brought me weeks ago, quiet and unwitnessed, the one I'd been too afraid to look at. Then I unpinned the second one from my shirt. The twin General Hawk had fixed there in front of 300 people. The same decoration made real a second time by being seen. 2 identical stars for one night's work, the private and the public. And I laid them side by side on the same bed of dark velvet and closed the lid over both. Some people would have worn it to breakfast, would have left it on the mantel where the yacht club crowd could see. I understood finally why I'd never wanted to. A medal in a case doesn't stop being real just because no one's looking at it. That's the whole secret my father never learned. The one that cost him a daughter's respect and a tackle box full of shame. The truest things you'll ever do are the ones nobody sees, on nights you can't describe, for people who can't thank you. I set the closed box on the nightstand, and for the first time in 5 weeks, in that quiet little room at the top of the stairs, I slept the whole night through. I drove home Sunday with the radio off and the black box on the passenger seat, where the text message had come in 2 days before. And I thought about hedges and photographs, and the strange arithmetic of a family that measures worth by what the neighbors can see. My father is still my father. He didn't transform on that lawn. People rarely do. And the world he lives in, where you are only worth what you can show, is still standing and still full of people who believe it. But it doesn't own me anymore. And it won't own the daughters Bianca might have. That's the only justice that's real. Not that the machine breaks, but that you walk out of it and take the next one with you. Honor isn't the thing you show people. It's the thing that's still there after everyone looks away. I stopped waiting to be seen the day 300 strangers saw me first. A seating card with no name, a text behind a hedge, a black box I finally opened. If you've ever been the quiet one in your family, the useful one, the one they hide at the back to keep the picture clean, hear me on this. You don't need their permission to stand up straight. The people who matter will know you by what you carry, not by what you show. So, put yourself back in the picture. If this one made you sit a little taller, tell me in the comments about the moment you stopped waiting to be seen, and subscribe to their secret stories, and I'll meet you back here for the next one.